Shabbat Shalom, beautiful family. We're here again on this beautiful Sabbath. Today we're continuing reading the book of Numbers, King James Version. Today, my family, as well as you, the intuitive cosmic family, will join in with us in this discussion of Numbers chapters 13 through 16 we read today. So we'll talk about what we got from there, what Spirit directed us to, and wisdom we got out of the chapters of Numbers, chapters 13 through 16. Who would like to go first?
Me.
Okay, Richie.
Okay, what spoke to me was Numbers chapter 14, verse 18. The Lord is long-suffering and of great mercy, forgiving iniquity and transgression, and by no means clearing the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation. The reason why this spoke to me is because it's explaining like how God has a lot of mercy, and how he'll bring mercy on people and stuff. And it was talking about how iniquity and transgression in the third and fourth generations and stuff.
Okay, let's break that down a little further. So in part of that, it also speaks on and by no means clearing the guilty. So it's saying he's not clearing the guilty of their wrongs, but so then when they're saying he has mercy and forgiveness though for iniquity and transgressions. Now, what is a transgression? Remember we spoke about this a little while back about the difference between transgression and a sin. Do you remember or no?
Well, I know transgression means like a law or something.
Well, it's almost the way you think about something, but it's also the steps you take after. So transgressions would mean you did something wrong, and a lot of times if you know you've committed a transgression against God, you're more likely to do what? You're gonna more likely to ask for forgiveness, right?
Yeah.
So when in this instance too, so it's speaking about the guilty and inequity of the fathers, it's saying you're still gonna be held accountable. So your guilt is not clearing, but a lot of times you don't have certain things to worry about. Why? When you bring your transgressions, when you bring your sins to the good Lord and you offer up an offering, right? When you have a sin offering, you have offerings for your transgressions, correct? So there's a difference, because you have people who are sinners who sin, and people who commit certain things, acts against God's law, but they don't ask for forgiveness, right? They're not offering up they don't have any offering. They're not, changing their ways. And so, no, he's saying, don't think, if you're someone who is guilty, that your guilt is going to get clear for this. And also, guilt is what? Guilt is a symptom of
sin.
Yeah, so guilt is more so a symptom of sin. It's your consciousness. So that's something that even if God do forgive you of something, does that mean your guilt is just going to go away?
No.
Maybe not, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes that's a good thing, because it can keep you from repeating your sin, right? Okay. Anything else you would like to add?
Okay, my name is Elijah, and I wanted to do chapters 14, verses 22. Because all those men which have seen my glory and my miracles which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have tempted me now these 10 times, and have not hearkened to my voice. This spoke to me because it's basically saying that even though God has shown these people his glory and his miracles and his blessings, they're basically mocking him, and they still choose to sin and stuff. So that's what spoke to me. Yes. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
What stuck out to me was chapter 14, verse 27. How long shall I bear with this evil congregation which murmur against me? I have heard the murmurings of the children of Israel, which they murmur against me. This stuck out to me because it's basically speaking about God's wrath, because he was speaking to Aaron and Moses about how he was angry about how the children of Israel kept on like complaining and they were being ungrateful. And he basically said that he can hear everything that they're saying, and it's basically just nothing of gratitude. All of it is just complaints coming from them, and they're just not living right, especially after all the Lord has done for them.
Yeah, so basically they keep crying and rehashing their need to get back to Egypt. Okay, family, so it's me, God's Hammer, Ty, and for me today it was Numbers chapter 16, verse 13. It is a small thing that thou hast brought us up out of a land that floweth with milk and honey, to kill us in the wilderness, except thou make thyself altogether a prince over us. Moreover, thou hast not brought us into a land that floweth with milk and honey, or given us inheritance of fields and vineyards. Wilt thou put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up. So this is part of those in the congregation, those that have come from the 12 tribes, and they're basically coming out against Moses specifically, but Moses and Aaron, because they feel like they don't know why God would have chose just Moses, and they feel like they can also be a part of what Moses is doing and they can lead the people, because they're feeling like, why did we come out of a land that was flowing with milk and honey in Egypt to come out into the wilderness? So at this point, we're probably at like the 5th time where they've basically came out and they explained their need or want to go back to Egypt, because they feel like the land was greater, that things were better when they were they were the footstool of the Egyptians, versus them coming out into gaining freedom. And as we all know, a lot of times when you are let out of enslavement and entrapment, there's going to be a sense of and a feeling, and really in reality there will be uncomfortableness, right? It's difference in scenery. There's going to be changes, right? Because they're learning the laws that was given in Leviticus. Right now, the tribes have been, they were doing some delineation within the tribes and acknowledging the tribes of those in the lineage of their fathers and fathers from which they came from, and the roles that they were going to play. And so even with all of this that has been said, now they want to take an oath. They want to take a vote, and they want to use these censors. And immediately when me and my family were reading this, I said, y'all, we know what's getting ready to happen, because the last time these censors was involved and somebody came out and spoke against Moses and Aaron, and that was Aaron's sons, right? They were also priests just like Aaron, and God ended up getting rid of them, right? Mm-hmm. And then they were given warning, and they ceased to listen to that warning, and basically they were demolished, right? They were taken with the sword of God, amen. And that's just what happens when you come out against God and you have this sense of jealousy, this sense of fear mongering, and this need to have control. And at the end of the day, we learned and we read through chapters Numbers 9 through 12 why God chose Moses, because he said he is one of the meekest in the land, right? Mm-hmm. Which means he is a humble person, and so he does not feed on esoteric, on ego. He's thinking about everyone when he comes to God and he's praying. He was only and always thinking about the people, even when he didn't have confidence in himself when he first started speaking to the good Lord. And so this is why God chose him to lead the people, because God needs a leader that is humble and someone who is selfless, that's going to think about others as well. Doesn't mean that they're not taking care of themselves and they're not doing for themselves, but that means that he's always thinking of this group of people as a community together, and not just for himself in selfish ways and needs, or about worldly things, as some of these people are. They want to get back to Egypt because they miss worldly things, right? They miss the comforts that a lot of the worldly things gave them, even though they were literally underneath this group of people, the Egyptians, when they lived there, right? Because this wasn't really their land. They were living amongst the Egyptians, and they would have been the secondary if So basically, God ends up taking 250 people, but he also calls on Moses and Aaron to pull away a few other tribes, right? He tells them to go on and speak to Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And so he calls on them and the elders and their lineage, and he gets them out of the midst of them. And basically, God not only takes the 250 people, but 14,700 people are also swallowed up in the midst of all of this, that were a part of that lineage, that were more so a part of the families of the people who took on those censers and who tried to come up against Aaron and Moses, because they were God's chosen people, because God chose them to be prophets and to lead this group of people, and they just could not see themselves out of this mist, and they just wanted to have the control of this congregation and change the narrative of why they were in the wilderness and God's plan for getting them out of the wilderness to a place of milk and honey, even if it wasn't the one that they thought to be, which was in the land of Egypt when they were under the rule of the Pharaoh, who they were obviously not happy with, because if they were, they would have never fled in the first place, correct? And they obviously believed in God's miracles when he was proving them to Pharaoh, and he hardened his heart, and God released all those different, plagues amongst them in Egypt, or amongst the Egyptians, yet not amongst those of the Hebrew Israelite tribes. And so for these people to speak out amongst God and his powers in his way of leading them into where he's trying to take them next, this is just God's way of showing us how a lot of times we are being tested, right? And people always, they just have no patience, and not even just that they don't have any patience, that they have disregard and lack of belief and faith, and how easily they are to forget God's power, how easy they were to forget God's mercy and favor that he had on their lives, and to get them out of that place. And so that's what spoke to me the most. And Numbers, which was in chapter 16. I also liked what I read in chapters 15 as well. And I can't wait to see you guys again for another Sabbath session.
Thanks for tuning in for today's Sabbath session. See you next time.